Hello everyone, I am Brian P. Easton, and I am the author of the autobiography of the Werewolf Hunter series. Welcome to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter.
From the dusty mesa, her looming shadow grows, hidden in the branches of the poison creosote. She twines her spines up slowly towards the boiling sun, and when I touched her skin, my fingers ran with blood.
Thanks for coming back to the Werewolf Bar, folks, for your March edition of the show. We're glad you could take some time to stop by tonight. We've got a lot of exciting things to share with you and some things we've been working on. Tex Grebner is back with us this evening for new tools of the trade, as is Dr. T. Broussard with Doc Talk Shop and Amanda Rogers with Amanda Asks. But first, our creature of the night. Tonight, I'm just going to have a round of an old standby here at the Werewolf Bar, which is Clark and Sheffield Bourbon. Now, Clark and Sheffield is a product of Benny's Liquors out of Chicago, Illinois. And we've had this before here on the show, and I enjoy it quite a bit. To you. Yeah, see, it's a tasty whiskey, and at 90 proof, it has a little more ass in its britches than your average bourbon, which tends to weigh in at around 80 proof. Like I say, this is from Benny's Liquors, a store brand. So if you have a Benny's near you, you might want to check it out. Our latest update on the Winter Fox Journal's audiobook is that it's going to be released through spokenrealms.com, and that will eventually feed into its Amazon page. Now, we've had some issues with this one, which has kept us from getting it to you, and just about the time we thought that we were good to go, another set of technical problems has reared its ugly head, gotten in our way. So what's happening now is that because of the nature of these issues, I'm going to give a listen to the files first before they get set up and finalized. The last thing I want, besides a sharp stick in the eye, to roll out this audiobook only to find out that pieces of it are missing or they're out of order. Lord knows we've had enough problems with that in the print edition, and we don't want that happening to ruin the Audible experience. So I'll keep you posted on my Facebook page if anything should change. But as for right now, even once the book is uploaded and finalized, it could take another month before it becomes available. And it's as disappointing to me as it is anybody else. And that brings us to our Legends of the Werewolf Hunter Anthology Volume 2. Now, we've been touting this thing to you for several months. And the last update we had for you was that we were going to launch a Kickstarter campaign for it. That campaign is now in its pre-launch phase. We go live on the 19th. That's this coming Tuesday. And it will run for 30 days. So I want to encourage everybody listening to this to follow this URL, for which you'll find the link in the description below. That takes you to the pre-launch page where you can click the green Notify Me on Launch button to follow the project. Once it launches on Tuesday, you'll get to see the full scope of the thing, including the descriptions, the rewards, the images, and teasers of some of the stories inside. I hope you'll get involved at some level with this project. There are several different tiers which you can participate in, and there are a variety of products and add-on items that you can receive by backing this project, including ebooks, paperbacks, hardcover editions, tuckerization, a critique, and more, all of it brought to you by MB Press and myself. Just to recap, for those who may not be familiar with these anthologies, all the stories in them share connective tissue with my original trilogy and the Winter Fox journals. This means that every one of the 10 original stories which you'll find in the book share incidents, characters, plot points, or some history with the series as a whole. And the idea of the thing is to explore some of the roads untraveled from the original books, the nooks and crannies, so to speak, where there are questions. We always have a lot of fun with these, and our authors have put together a collection of tales that we think you're really going to enjoy very much. So as of right now, the Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter series is composed of 5 books, not counting these 2 anthologies I just talked about. That's quite a bit for one person to remember, me being the one person, especially when the titles stretch from 2003 to 2023. That's right, last year was my first book's 20th anniversary, and somehow that completely escaped my notice until now. The first book was self-published in 2003 under the title When the Autumn Moon is Bright, an autobiography of a werewolf hunter. Heart of Scars was also self-published. That was in 2008. And then both of those titles got picked up by Permuted Press in 2010. And then The Lineage came along in 2015. So next year, 2025, will be the 15th anniversary, 15th year Autobiography of a Werewolf Hunter and Heart of Scars have been with Permuted Press. And it'll mark the 10th year for The Lineage. Now, the reason I mention all this is because as a way to commemorate that anniversary, we're developing some new cover art for the original trilogy. We've been coming up with some pretty cool stuff, and we'll have more information on that as 2025 gets a little bit closer. But like I mentioned before, sometimes it's hard to keep track of everything I've written, though I do my dead level best to maintain continuity. So many nooks and crannies of the Werewolf Hunter universe, the whole thing just kind of tends to lend itself to questions and unopened doors. That's where the anthologies fit in, but it's also where Amanda Rogers fits in, as well as viewers like yourself, to find opportunity for curiosity. So here is your March 2024 installment of Amanda Asks.
Today comes from Danny. Danny is one of your internet viewers. And Danny wants to know, how far have you traveled? You've got lots and lots of places in your books, and all of them are very vividly described. He wants to know, have you been to these places? And if not, how do you get your ideas about these places? Do you check them out online? That's what Danny's wondering today, and I've been wondering that too.
Okay, that's a good question, and one that veers away from what I've written and more towards how I came to write it, I think. Now, I've traveled pretty extensively, been to both coasts in the Gulf here in the States, and I've seen a good deal of Europe. But I must confess, I have not been everywhere. Sylvester has, and this was especially true when I was writing the first novel. Now, I'd been to the Canadian Rockies at that point, and some of the southern states where he finds himself. But at the time I was writing it, which was around the year 2000, I had never been to New Orleans. And as you may know, a good chunk of the first book takes place there in the Big Easy. Now, I pride myself on my research when it comes to writing about someplace, especially if it's someplace I've never been. And I did about as much research on New Orleans as I've ever done on any place. I picked the brains of people who have been there, read travel books, I studied maps, so I could present the most firsthand experience I possibly could. I did the same thing with South Vietnam during the war portion of the first book. And of course, there's a lot more to know about that than just the geography and the politics of the region. But I interviewed former POWs of that war. And when it came to write about the Canadian prison system, I managed to track down a few people who were willing to share their experiences there with me. And so many of the details of these periods and places are literally attributable to people I had the opportunity to speak with and who had been there, done that. It's a real treat for me to research and write about places I've never been. And I think that's one of the reasons why the lineage was so much fun to put together. For that, I watched all kinds of documentaries or series about Botswana, on Malta, the Isle of Cyprus, and of course the Himalaya. And the internet, of course, has made this so much easier than it used to be. Entire worlds of information at our fingertips, as opposed to back in the late 90s and early 2000s when I was putting the first book together. Most of my research came from the university library. I would spend hours in the stacks there ferreting out the information I required just maybe for the next paragraph that I was going to write. Xerox copies were a nickel a piece. Tell me more, Grandpa, I know. But they were a nickel a piece, and I probably spent somewhere around $100 on those machines, photocopying images, pages from books I needed just to tell a convincing story. And this was all very important to me because I wanted to suspend the disbelief as much as I could, enough so I didn't have to take artistic license with things that already existed in real life. I've said it before, but the entire point of that approach for me was to ground the books in a world that we live in and depict it as what it might look like if werewolves were hunting us. Many thanks to Danny, who sent the question in to Amanda Asks. And of course, if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, be sure to send it to Amanda at the email address you saw at the end of her segment. Well, after a couple of months hiatus, Tex Grebner is back with us tonight. Tex likes to explore the possibilities when it comes to killing werewolves. And this episode of Tools of the Trade is no exception. Here's Tex Grebner.
Welcome to Tools of the Trade here on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. I'm Tex Grebner. I've been away for a while. And we're going to be revisiting some previous tools of the trade because I've been thinking a little bit and I've been really busy, but we're fitting it in. Now, this is a foam deer head that I have ratchet strapped onto my throwing knife target. And I actually filmed this segment a while ago, but I didn't really have anything that I could do with it. So, this here and this is the cranial-ocular cavity. Nose, at least on a human face, nose and eyes. The cranial-ocular cavity is the fastest, softest way to the off switch. So let's say that we need to throw a knife into the face of a werewolf with one killing stick. But this, not deer in popular mythology, has the closest approximation that I can come up with of having to throw a blade into the brain, but over the muzzle that you would be dealing with a fully ascended werewolf. The other reason that the headshot is important, especially with, say, a thrown dagger, is to stay out of reach, but in some iterations of the Loup-Garou mythology, a cut across the face will break the curse. Which brings me into a Disney Beauty and the Beast hot take about the Beast and Gaston. Gaston is an asshole, but what Gaston does not do is kidnap a woman, lock her away with books to bribe her, and then keep her until Stockholm Syndrome convinces her that she loves him. Gaston is an asshole, and he's arrogant. And yes, he does try and put crazy old Maurice in the asylum for selfish reasons, but also, let's be real, Maurice is a menace to society, and this way Belle could move on with her life. Anyways, the reason that I bring up Beauty and the Beast is in the ending of Beauty and the Beast, the animated version. Gaston stabs the Beast. And I always thought that it was an interesting thought fracturing of a fractured fairy tale to think that what if Gaston stabbing the Beast actually was a component in breaking the curse by drawing the prince's blood, as well as the curse being broken by the rose. But I don't know. The question is, can you throw a blade, and are you good enough to draw blood while staying out of reach? In the interest of revisiting other tools of the trade, since I've mentioned the cranial-ocular cavity, that's roughly the size of the clay pigeon. And you've probably figured out through some of my segments, and if we've talked, that I'm a big fan of the spear as a thrown edge weapon as well. And so, we're going to take out a clay pigeon with a thrown spear. And this is the first time that I've actually had good lighting and good backdrop where you can actually see and hear everything connect. So, based off the height that I actually hit it, we can assume maybe, assuming suspension of disbelief and plot armor, that as egotistical as this sounds, that it would be theoretically possible to brain shot with a spear a Darkest Wolven. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this month's episode of Tools of the Trade. Thanks for watching.
I am always impressed by how well that man can throw a weapon, be it a knife, a hatchet, or a lance. I've thrown tomahawks and knives in my life from time to time, and it's always hit and miss with me. And with a miss, I'm usually replacing a handle of something when I'm finished. But yeah, if you can punch through to the brain in a single shot, you've got yourself the best kill blow ever. The off switch, as Tex put it. And it's interesting that Tex brought up the subject of Beauty and the Beast for a couple of reasons. For one, Gaston is one of my favorite Disney villains. I mean, after the Big Bad Wolf and the Headless Horseman, he's a solid number 3 for me. The other reason is because Beauty and the Beast always reminds me of how an emotion, such as love, can be weaponized against an enemy like the Beast. And in this instance, when I say beast, I'm talking about werewolves. So, as with the original fable, as well as all its adaptations that I'm aware of, it's beauty that always kills the beast, right? That famous line at the end of King Kong, 1933, it wasn't the airplanes that got him, it was beauty killed the beast. And it's something that Sylvester realizes in the third book of the trilogy, The Lineage, which is in the area of supernatural conflict, where emotions can become tools of the trade. Possibly the most powerful of those, and also the most difficult to wield, is love. And this harkens back to the old Universal Studios Wolfman movies, where the legends say that a werewolf can only be killed fired by the hand of someone who loves him enough to understand or enough to care. Okay, so that's a quaint Hollywood notion from its golden age. But what Sylvester comes to realize and understand at the end of the book is that he has weaponized hatred and anger his entire life. But the one thing that he could never get a handle on was love, largely because he's very unacquainted with the idea due to his self-imposed separation from what he considered weak emotions. It's just not on his radar. But as the climax of the story looms, he comes to see that there is truth in that old boilerplate notion about love and silver bullets. And he largely realizes this because he comes to understand that his hatred, which has lived in him most of his life, springs from the fact that he loved his father and his wife and his son, all of which were taken from him. And that all of the anger and the rage all comes from that love enduring past their deaths and taking the most violent form that it really can. I can't say much more about the ending of The Lineage without spoiling the end of the entire trilogy, so I'm going to leave it at that and call it a dust-up. Thank you, Tex, for presenting and demonstrating some of your skill set for us this evening. If you've read my books, then you know I utilize, in addition to weaponry, generous portions of the supernatural. Different forms of witchcraft, magical traditions, ghosts, and spirits, and of course, werewolfism. They all find their way into the story of Sylvester James and his mentor, Michael Winterfox. And just like Amanda helps us keep track of the story itself, Dr. Broussard helps us unravel some of their occultic mysteries. Doc has been with us for a few seasons now, and he always brings us his insight and experience into these matters. Tonight I've asked Doc to talk to us a little bit about a relatively unknown paradigm, at least on this continent, called Quimbanda, which is a Brazilian tradition associated with Macumba, and one of which is characterized in the figure of Cesar Christie from the Heart of Scars and The Lineage. So the doctor is in, and here's Dr. T with Doc Talk Shop.
Hello and welcome to Doc Talk Shop. That's part of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Tonight, we will be addressing the tradition of Quimbanda, which some people see as part of Macumba or just the dark side of Brazilian magic, but it is in fact its own tradition with connections but separate and distinct from many others. For example, it does intersect with voodoo in some ways, but in the main, it is a mingling of Afro-Brazilian spirits with various occult traditions from Europe, such as the Grimoire tradition of France. That's why you have Eshu, like the Eshu of the Seven Crossroads, connected with Astaroth. and other issue connected with Lucifer and so on from the Western esoteric occult traditions. Quimbanda is an religious magical system, or religio-magical system, which reveres ultimately a divinity apart from all other spirit beings, known to some as Nzambe, from which the term zombie actually comes. Nzambe is also known in traditional voodoo as Bonde. While there are 7 major kingdoms in Quimbanda, there are 2 main types of spirit beings, the Eshu, which is the male spirit of the crossroads, and then we have Quimbanda, Pambagera, which is the female spirit of the crossroads. Now, the term crossroads here refers to any sort of liminal space, a doorway, an actual crossroads, and different types of crossroads are available. So you find these spirits at intersections of streets, cemetery gates, haunted houses. Now, each of these spirits is represented by a seal or sigil known in Quimbanda as a panto. Panto meaning points. These symbols point to the spirits, and you'll see that in their designs, many of them echo the sigils from the old Grimoire traditions of Europe. Now, while it is true that these spirits have been venerated for thousands of years in some cases, the tradition of Quimbanda itself, as practiced today, really only starts in the mid 18th to early 19th century, in which the indigenous populations came in contact with European traditions with enough literacy to make use of books like the Quimbanda or the Keys of Solomon or the Grand Grimoire. It's of interest that while many of the mixtures in that part of the world were of Spanish and native peoples, the traditions they drew from Europe tended to come more from the French tradition, so that you have a lot of focus on using the Grand Grimoire or the Red Dragon, for example, from France. Now, Quimbanda is very much a mediumistic tradition in the sense of through dance, through sacrifice and offerings, persons could get in touch with the spirits and acquire aid, much like voodoo. Different types of spirits respond to different things. Each spirit has its own colors, its own symbols. And so different cults evolved around those spirits, different combinations of devotees evolved. Now, there are those that consider Quimbanda solely malevolent. That's not true. Like any tradition, it has its social norms and then things that go outside the society. The allegations of malevolence come from the fact that it was through Quimbanda that a lot of what they would now call marginalized people chose to defend themselves or were inspired to defend themselves through For example, it's only when you have the backing of the spirits that you'd be willing to take on people who have the backing of the church, even if that backing is only in their imagination. The spirits of Quimbanda are very much the spirits of revolution. They are the restless dead. They are the unquiet dead. They have a lot to do with the forces behind upheaval, of anarchy, of going outside the acceptable. They're the spirits of the extreme. Now, with reference to the Sylvesterverse that Brian P. Easton so wonderfully brought to life, he has the assassin Cesar Christie face Sylvester when Sylvester is possessed by a Wendigo. Well, ordinarily, the person facing a Wendigo would be at a huge disadvantage, but Cesar, having the issue within him, or guiding him, was on pretty even keel because those spirits of hunger and so forth that the Wendigo represent are pretty well matched by the forces that the Eshu represent. And Eshu are very welcoming of blood and flesh in terms of offering, depending on the particular cults one is dealing with. And due to what we know of Cesar Christie, it's very unlikely that he would have been drawing from one of the more pleasant lines of spirits in Quimbanda. Even Quimbanda had its more pleasant and less pleasant types of beings. You'll find that the Eshu tend to be very much trickster spirits, and the Hamburguero, or turning dove spirits, tend to be more sensual and so forth. And all of these spirits are sort of a combination of dead persons and mythological being, in the sense of it was a dead queen that became associated with the spiritual queen of Seven Crossroads, and that became the Pomegera, known as the Queen of Seven Crossroads. And within the worldview of Quimbanda, all of these spirits are sort of outside the religious and spiritual norms that they come from. So, for example, I've heard of a German practitioner that has among his spirits a Nazi ghost that he works with in order to make the ghost redeem itself for what it did in life. Obviously, Quimbanda, being very much a mediumistic tradition connected to the dead, has a lot to do with necromancy, as we would think of it today. And in large part, that is what Quimbanda is. It is working with those spirits that the orthodox religions, paths, and traditions would not accept. They will use the icon of the Sabbathic goat, the serpent, and other images that seem largely as negative by most people, but they will see them as a positive force. They are primal, powerful forces. That's why they look so fearsome, but they're forces that can be put to a positive application. Much like in Buddha, you'll see the casting of seals, you'll see placing of candles, offering of blood, offering of meat, offering of food and other stuffs. Music and dance playing a large part in many of the rituals. Unlike Voodoo, you will see with Quimbanda things left at actual crossroads. The rituals will be done somewhat out in the open, whereas in Voodoo, they'd be hidden more. And it's only, I would say, in the past 15, 20 years that the general public is becoming more and more aware of Quimbanda. For example, the character of Cesar Christie is a rarity in fiction to have a character dealing with, the issue, in fiction. I mean, there's a lot there that could be mined, and you will often find the various spirits connected with saints. So again, you have that whole intersection, no pun intended, between the divine, the infernal, the native, and the European, all in one. So, for example, while Voodoo and Quimbanda are by no means the same, you will find some traditions that concern the lower Voodoo because, for example, the entity known as Eshu, Spirit of the Crossroads, would be recognized by Voodoo practitioner as Legba. But whereas in Voodoo, Legba is a mediumistic spirit of the crossroads, in Quimbanda, Eshu is in large degree the main focus of devotion. So it's almost like it's his own cult apart from Voodoo. For example, in New Orleans, you'll find practitioners of both Voodoo and Quimbanda. Now, I keep keeping them separate because they are traditions. They intersect in part, but they are their own thing and they need to be respected as such. In my own work, I came to know Quimbanda through sources that are initiated, and so it plays a role in my work, in my books, for example. Although I mainly comment them through their connections to the Grimoire system, you'll see a lot of their seals echoing things in the Key of Solomon, and you'll have specific spirits that deal with the spirits of Solomon's magic. So again, this tradition is literally a melting pot in the New World of the Old and the New World. It is extremely powerful, and it is one of the main sources for the evolution of Brazilian consciousness, embracing both the African and the New World aspect as well as the aspect from Europe. So it's a real coming together, a melange, if you will, of factors that make this really beautiful, if not misunderstood, tradition. I would go so far as to describe it as a mode of shamanic witchcraft. It is the sword and shield in the hands of the oppressed. It is a means to fame and wealth. It all depends on how it's used, like with many other things. And in the case of Cesar Christie in Brian's books, he used it to keep himself going as an assassin, and I'm sure his spirits served him well in that regard, and he served them in turn. You see, to work for the spirit, to care for it, is to have it work with you. I mean, you don't get from it without giving to it. So, to some degree, it's like having a familiar, but this would be more than that. You're dealing with a lot more than just a typical imp or a typical type of spirit you're so familiar. Iconography associated with witchcraft in Europe, like the pitchfork or the trident, are very much a part of Quimbanda. And the thing to remember is this tradition is all about taking what is perceived as negative and making it positive. You take the spirit of the suicide, you take the spirit of the prostitute, and you make them serve positive or productive ends. You avenge that murdered prostitute by bringing love to someone. You avenge that suicide by having that person heal someone else on the edge of death. It's all about taking the unrequited forces and making them work for the living. It's also about restoring the honor of the dead. So, have that. So, with that, I will say, tend your spirits, mind the moon, and good hunting.
I created the character of Cesar Christie because I wanted to put an adversary in Sly's path, who was in many ways his antithesis. Right down to his knifeman skills and the fact that he was driven by a spirit, not his own. I put these two on a collision course, one working for the Victorian ring and the other for La Voisin, or the Jabberwocky. And then I watched what happened as these guys tangled. The fight was a real knockdown, drag-out test of skill and will, in which everyday office equipment becomes lethal weapons. From pencils and shelves to a heavy Xerox copier, these guys went at it hammer and tongs. And I suppose that I chose Quimbanda as Cesar's spiritual tradition because, as Doc pointed out, there's a lot of negative aspects associated with it. And if you're coming at it from the point of view of an assassin, that all kind of works out. I also liked it because it's fairly obscure. Outside of the people who study magical religious systems, not many people will have heard of it. Like they would, voodoo. So thanks to Dr. Broussard for being with us tonight and for sharing his thoughts and insights with us into this fascinating syncretic system. Well, it's last call, and I'm going to have another sip of the old Clark and Sheffield and tell you about something else we've got going on in the werewolf universe. Not only do we have the Kickstarter campaign in the works, not only do we have fresh cover art coming up for next year, but I am also in the process of putting together a pictorial of the book series. Now, this is not the graphic novel or the comic book that we've talked about before. That's still there and it's simmering on the back burner. No, this is a completely separate book that will contain depictions of the characters from the whole series so far. Not every last character, you understand, that would be unnecessary, but if you've ever wondered what a picture of Jericho would look like, we've got that. Or if you wanted to see representation of all the Beast Princes, got that too. Michael in the Trenches, check. A Siberian Darkest Woven, check. Right around 150 pieces of artwork are going into this thing, assembled to bring you the most vivid expressions of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter you will ever see. Unless, of course, it makes it screen. Like our other projects, we'll have more information for you as we go along. So subscribe to the channel and like our Facebook page so you don't miss an update. You can visit our webpage at werewolfhunter.com, and you can send me an email at brian@werewolfhunter.com. Pick up the books on Amazon or wherever you buy books, and thanks for dropping by for a while this evening. We hope to see you right back here again in April, but until then, the Werewolf Bar is closed. Happy hunting, and mind the moon.